She lived her life quietly, in a small town where everyone knew each other by face and name. Her days were simple but full. She woke up early every morning, before the sun had fully risen, and would spend a few quiet moments sitting by the window, drinking a cup of tea while listening to the soft hum of the town waking up. She liked to watch the birds as they flitted from branch to branch and listened to the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. It gave her a sense of peace she cherished deeply. Her home was modest but cozy. It was filled with memories, photographs, and little mementos she had collected over the years. There were no lavish decorations, no extravagant furniture, just the things that made her feel comfortable and happy. The kitchen always smelled of freshly baked bread or brewed coffee, and she often hummed quietly to herself while preparing meals. Neighbors often stopped by for a chat, and she welcomed them warmly, always offering a cup of tea or a small homemade treat. She worked in a small office downtown, helping people with paperwork and guiding them through processes they often found confusing. She had a way of explaining things patiently, never showing frustration even when someone was slow to understand. People trusted her, not because she was in a powerful position or had authority, but because she genuinely cared about them. She treated everyone with respect and kindness, believing that small gestures of goodwill could make the world a better place. Outside of work, she enjoyed simple pleasures. Walking through the park, reading old books she found at secondhand stores, and tending to her little garden gave her joy. She was never in a rush to chase after wealth or luxury. She found happiness in the quiet moments, the little things that others often overlooked. Her friends sometimes tried to persuade her to seek more, to live a life filled with finer things, but she always politely declined. She believed that true happiness came from contentment and the love she shared with people around her. Her family life was equally grounded. She maintained strong relationships with her parents and siblings, visiting them regularly and making sure they felt loved and supported. She was known for her empathy and her willingness to listen without judgment. Whenever someone had a problem, they knew they could count on her, not just for advice, but for the reassurance that someone cared. Though her life seemed ordinary to most, there was a quiet strength about her. She did not seek attention or recognition, but people were drawn to her sincerity and warmth. Even in moments of difficulty, she remained composed and resilient. She had faced challenges before, losses and setbacks that might have broken someone else's spirit, but she faced them with quiet courage and a steady heart. Life had taught her to value kindness over ambition, patience over haste, and simplicity over extravagance. One day, she received news that she would be traveling to another city for an important personal matter. It wasn't something she had anticipated, but she accepted it calmly, seeing it as part of life's unfolding journey. She packed her belongings carefully, making sure she had everything she would need, though she did so lightly. She didn't see the point in overpacking. She believed that comfort came from being prepared, not from carrying excess. At the airport, she moved through the crowd with ease. She didn't rush or push her way forward. She appreciated watching the people around her, noting the diversity in the crowd and the different expressions on their faces. She saw excitement, anxiety, and anticipation in equal measure. To her, airports were not just places of travel. They were small windows into the lives of countless individuals, each with their own story. When she reached the check-in counter, she was greeted politely by the staff. She requested her seat in the economy section, as she always preferred not to complicate her travel with unnecessary luxury. She liked feeling grounded even when flying miles above the earth. It made her feel that no matter where she went, she remained herself, unaffected by the allure of extravagance. While waiting at the boarding gate, she noticed the subtle glances from some passengers who seemed surprised at her choice to travel modestly. There were whispers and curious looks, but she paid them no mind. She had learned long ago that people often measured worth by material appearances, but she knew that a person's value was in their character, not in their possessions or the class of seat they chose on an airplane. When the flight was called, she walked calmly onto the plane. She offered polite greetings to the attendants and found her seat. As she settled in, she took a moment to appreciate the view outside the window. The sky stretching endlessly, painted with shades of orange and pink as the sun began to rise. It was a simple moment, but it felt profound. She always found a sense of wonder in seeing the world from above, and it reminded her of the bigger picture, of the countless lives and stories unfolding beneath her. During the flight, she kept herself occupied with reading a small book she had brought along. She smiled quietly at the words on the page, enjoying the escape they provided yet remaining aware of the world around her. She noticed the children laughing, the passengers chatting, and the attendants moving gracefully through the aisles. Every detail seemed to have a rhythm, a story, a pulse that made her feel connected to the larger world. She remained humble and polite, not drawing attention to herself. When offered assistance, she accepted it graciously but without fanfare. When someone asked about her destination or her reason for travel, she answered honestly but briefly, never exaggerating or embellishing. Her authenticity shone through naturally, leaving a lasting impression on those she interacted with. As the plane soared higher, she reflected quietly on her life. She thought about her parents, her siblings, her friends, and the small community that had shaped her into the person she had become. She thought about the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned. Through it all, she realized that her true wealth lay not in material possessions but in the relationships she had nurtured, the kindness she had shown, and the integrity with which she lived her life. When she looked around the cabin, she noticed a subtle difference in some passengers' expressions, an awareness of status, of privilege. She remained unaffected, choosing instead to focus on the simple truths she held dear. To her, life was not about impressing others or claiming a position of importance. It was about living genuinely, treating others with respect, and finding joy in the little things that made each day meaningful. She didn't seek recognition for her humility. She didn't perform kindness for applause or reward. She simply lived it naturally and consistently. It was a quality that made her stand out without her even trying. People sensed it even if they couldn't quite define it, and it left an impression far deeper than luxury or wealth ever could. The flight continued smoothly, and she continued her reflections, appreciating the journey not just as a means to an end, but as a moment of experience in itself. She watched the clouds drift beneath her and felt a sense of calm that few things could disturb. In her mind, life was like this flight, sometimes turbulent, sometimes serene, always moving forward. And just as she remained calm above the clouds, she faced her life with the same steady composure. By the time the plane began its descent, she felt a quiet anticipation. She was traveling not for luxury or adventure, but for a personal purpose that mattered deeply to her. She was ready to step off the plane and face the next chapter of her life with the same grounded, humble approach that had always guided her. Whatever awaited her on the other side, she knew she would meet it with grace, kindness, and the simplicity that had always defined her. As the wheels touched the runway and the plane slowed, she smiled quietly to herself. She was aware of the world's complexity, the varied lives around her, and the unpredictable paths people took. Yet she remained true to her principles, embracing the ordinary and extraordinary with equal measure. She stepped off the plane with calm assurance, carrying with her the strength, humility, and quiet joy that made her who she was, ready to continue her journey not as someone seeking recognition, but as someone living authentically, one simple, meaningful moment at a time. After settling into her seat on the plane, she noticed a flight attendant approaching with a polite smile. The attendant explained that there had been an unexpected change, and she was being offered an upgrade to a first-class seat. The woman looked at the luxurious cabin just a few steps ahead, with its spacious seats, fine fabrics, and plush surroundings. She could feel the attention from the attendant, hoping she would accept, but she politely shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm comfortable here," she said softly, a gentle smile on her face. "I really don't need it. This seat is fine." The attendant hesitated for a moment, a look of surprise crossing her face. It wasn't every day that someone turned down such an offer. She nodded politely, clearly impressed, and moved on to the next passenger. The woman settled back into her seat, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need luxury to feel content. She found comfort in simplicity, and that comfort was enough. Around her, other passengers were settling into their own spaces. Some were chatting on phones, some were reading, and some were already dozing off. She observed them with interest, but without judgment. Each person seemed wrapped up in their own little world, caught between anticipation, anxiety, or excitement. For the journey ahead, she felt a calm sense of connection to them, knowing that despite different lives and experiences, they were all sharing this moment together. Soon, the plane began to taxi to the runway. As it picked up speed, she looked out of the window and watched the buildings and roads blur beneath her. She always enjoyed this part of flying. The moment when the world seemed to stretch out endlessly and she felt as if she were leaving her ordinary life behind, if only for a short time. It was exhilarating yet peaceful, a mix that she rarely found anywhere else. During the flight, she noticed that several passengers were staring at her occasionally. At first, she wondered if she was imagining it, but then she realized they were likely curious about her choice to decline the first-class offer. Some people gave small smiles, others looked puzzled, and a few whispered quietly to one another. She didn't mind their curiosity. She had long learned not to be swayed by others' judgments or expectations. A man sitting nearby struck up a conversation with her. He seemed intrigued and asked why she had refused the upgrade. She smiled and explained simply that she preferred to keep her life uncomplicated. She enjoyed the small joys and didn't feel the need for unnecessary extravagance. The man listened carefully, clearly fascinated by her perspective. He had expected a story of disdain for first class or a simple excuse, but instead, he found genuine contentment and humility. "That's refreshing," he said after a pause. "Most people would have jumped at the chance." She nodded gently, shrugging her shoulders. "I don't measure happiness by the things I have. Comfort and peace of mind are more important to me." The conversation moved naturally and she found herself smiling often, though modestly. She had a way of making people feel at ease not by talking about herself, but by showing interest in them. She asked about the man's travels, listened to his stories, and responded with thoughtful comments. Her presence was calming and he seemed to sense that she viewed life differently from most people he knew. Meanwhile, the flight continued smoothly, and she turned her attention to the little book she had brought along. She enjoyed reading, not to escape reality, but to engage with ideas and stories that sparked reflection. Her eyes moved steadily across the pages and she occasionally looked out the window, appreciating the changing landscapes below. The clouds seemed like soft blankets floating beneath her, and she felt a sense of freedom and possibility in the air. The flight attendants moved gracefully along the aisles, attending to passengers' needs with polite efficiency. At one point, one of them returned to her and offered a glass of juice, perhaps as a gesture of appreciation for her humility. She accepted it with a quiet thank you and took a small sip, savoring the simple refreshment. She didn't need lavish meals or fine wines to enjoy the experience. A small gesture was enough to make her feel cared for. As the hours passed, she found herself observing the dynamics of the cabin with quiet curiosity. Some passengers seemed stressed or impatient, tapping on screens or checking watches frequently. Others were content to sit back and enjoy the flight. She reflected on how different people cope with the same situation in varying ways. She noticed the anxiety in some, the calm in others, and the excitement in those traveling to meet loved ones. It reminded her that life was full of perspectives, and she appreciated the lessons hidden in ordinary observations. A child sitting a few rows ahead started crying, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings. She watched a young mother try to comfort him, offering gentle words and soothing motions. The woman felt empathy and quietly hoped the child would soon calm down. It reminded her of her own childhood experiences and the simple comforts that made challenges more bearable. She thought about the small acts of kindness that often go unnoticed but hold immense significance. Midway through the flight, she noticed the first-class cabin again, visible through the partition. The seats looked more luxurious than before, and passengers there were clearly enjoying the extra space and amenities. Yet she felt no envy. Instead, she felt a quiet affirmation of her own choices. She knew that happiness was not determined by surroundings or status, but by attitude and perspective. Her heart felt light, knowing she could appreciate luxury without being tempted or dependent on it. The plane moved steadily, and she occasionally nodded to passengers who caught her eye, exchanging smiles that required no words. She believed in connecting with people in small, authentic ways. Sometimes a simple smile could convey warmth and understanding, far better than any conversation. Those moments were meaningful, even fleeting, and she cherished them deeply. During the later part of the flight, she reflected on her upbringing and values. Her parents had always taught her to be honest, humble, and generous. They valued hard work and integrity over material success. She carried these lessons in her heart, and they guided her decisions even in moments when she could have chosen otherwise. Declining the first-class seat was not a statement but a natural expression of who she was. She also thought about the world outside the plane, the lives of countless people she would never meet, the challenges they faced, and the joys they experienced. She felt a sense of gratitude for her own life, simple as it might be. Gratitude filled her heart, not for what she had in abundance, but for the love, health, and opportunity that allowed her to live meaningfully. As the flight approached its destination, the woman felt a quiet excitement. She was eager to see what awaited her on the ground, not with expectations of grandeur, but with readiness to experience life as it came. She had learned that true happiness did not come from external appearances, but from inner peace and authenticity. This principle had guided her throughout life, and it guided her now. When the pilot announced the descent, she looked out the window and watched the city below come into view. The buildings, streets, and people seemed small yet intricate, a reminder of the vastness and complexity of life. She felt a sense of connection, knowing that her journey was one of many, each significant in its own way. She smiled quietly, feeling the thrill of arrival and the calm assurance that she would meet whatever came next with her usual grace and composure. As the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The simple act of landing brought a sense of accomplishment, a reminder that journeys, both literal and metaphorical, have their own rhythms and rewards. She gathered her belongings carefully, making sure nothing was left behind, and prepared to disembark with the same humility and patience she had shown throughout the flight. When she walked down the aisle, passengers gave her polite nods and small smiles. Some looked curious, perhaps still pondering why she had declined the first-class offer. She returned the gestures with a gentle smile, feeling no need to explain. Her actions had been authentic, and that authenticity mattered more than any explanation could. She believed that those who noticed and appreciated her choice would understand it in their own way. As she stepped off the plane, she took a deep breath of the fresh air outside the terminal. The city greeted her with the buzz of activity and life. She felt ready to continue her journey, embracing each new experience without pretense or expectation. She walked with calm confidence, knowing that her choices reflected who she was, not what others thought she should be. Her heart remained grounded, her spirit calm, and her mind open to the unfolding moments ahead. She looked back briefly at the plane, thinking about the flight and the lessons it had reinforced. Life, like the journey, offered choices and opportunities. Some were tempting, others comfortable, but the most meaningful were those aligned with one's values and inner peace. She smiled to herself, satisfied that she had lived this experience in a way that was true to her nature. Walking toward the exit of the airport, she felt a quiet thrill of anticipation. There were people waiting to meet her, places to visit, and experiences to embrace. Yet she knew that no matter what luxury or grandeur she might encounter, her essence would remain unchanged. She had always believed that true worth came from kindness, humility, and authenticity. These principles guided her now as they had throughout her life, and they would continue to do so in the moments and challenges that awaited her outside the plane's doors. When she arrived at the airport of the new city, the air felt different, warmer, busier, and full of energy. She pulled her small suitcase along, her steps steady and unhurried. People rushed past her, some talking on phones, others calling for taxis. She didn't mind the pace. She had always believed that life had its own rhythm, and there was no need to race through it. After collecting her luggage, she made her way toward the exit, where a driver stood holding a small sign with her name on it. She smiled politely and walked up to him. The driver greeted her respectfully and offered to take her bags. She thanked him and followed him to a sleek black car waiting outside. It looked luxurious, far grander than anything she was used to, and for a moment she wondered if there had been a mistake. But the driver assured her it was arranged specifically for her. She accepted it quietly, not wanting to make a scene, and settled into the back seat. As the car moved through the city streets, she gazed out. To the window, tall buildings, colorful markets, and busy intersections passed by. The city was alive with sounds and movement, so different from her calm little town. Yet she felt at ease, as if every place she visited had something new to teach her. She liked to observe people, not out of curiosity, but because it reminded her how unique every life was. After a while, the car turned into a long driveway, leading to a grand house on a quiet street. The home looked elegant but welcoming, surrounded by tall trees and blooming flowers. The driver opened the door for her, and a kind-faced woman came out to greet her. It was someone she had met briefly before, her husband's assistant. She smiled warmly and helped her inside. The house was filled with soft light and gentle music playing in the background. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the polished furniture to the fresh flowers in every corner. She felt a bit out of place but didn't say anything. The assistant led her to a comfortable room and offered her tea. She accepted, sitting quietly, looking around at the beauty of her surroundings. As she sipped her tea, she heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Her husband entered the room, smiling warmly as he saw her. He looked tired but happy, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. She stood up and greeted him with the same calm grace she carried everywhere she went. They sat together for a while, talking about her journey and how everything went. He listened carefully, occasionally laughing softly when she told him how she declined the offer for a first-class seat. She spoke about it casually, unaware of the surprise that flickered across his face when she mentioned the airline's name. For a brief moment he seemed caught off guard, but then he smiled again, a knowing expression in his eyes. "You refused a first-class seat on that airline?" he asked gently. She nodded, smiling lightly. "Yes, they insisted, but I didn't feel comfortable. It seemed unnecessary. The seat I had was perfectly fine." He chuckled quietly, though there was warmth in his laughter. "You always surprise me," he said softly. "Most people would have accepted it without thinking twice." She tilted her head, curious about his reaction. "I just don't see the point of spending more when you can travel comfortably without it. Luxury isn't what makes a journey special. It's the experience." He looked at her for a moment, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. He wanted to tell her something, but he hesitated, unsure of how she might react. He admired her simplicity, the very thing that had drawn him to her, but what he was about to say could change how she saw him. He decided to wait until the right moment. They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying a quiet dinner together. She noticed that he seemed distracted at times, his mind elsewhere, but she didn't press him. She had learned long ago that people often needed time to share their thoughts. She respected that silence, believing that patience often revealed the truth better than questions. The next morning she woke up early as usual. The house was peaceful, sunlight streaming through the curtains. She walked to the garden and took a deep breath, admiring the flowers and the quiet hum of the city beyond the walls. She had always loved mornings, the stillness, the promise of a new day. It gave her a sense of renewal, a reminder that no matter how busy life became, there was always beauty in simplicity. As she sat on a garden bench, her husband joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and sat beside her. For a few moments, they both sat quietly, enjoying the calm. Finally, he turned to her and said gently, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." She looked at him with mild curiosity, sensing his seriousness but not feeling anxious. "What is it?" He took a breath, his voice calm but deliberate. "The airline you flew on yesterday, the one where you refused the first-class seat, it's actually mine." She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Yours?" she repeated softly. He nodded. "Yes, I own it. It's one of the companies I built over the years." For a moment, she didn't speak. The words hung in the air, simple yet unbelievable. She looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet surprise. It wasn't shock or disbelief in the dramatic sense, it was more a gentle pause, as if her mind was trying to fit this new truth into the simple picture of her life. After a few moments, she let out a small laugh, not of mockery but of pure amazement. "You mean I refused a seat in my own husband's airline?" He smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "You did." She shook her head slowly, still smiling. "Well, that's something I'll never forget." He reached for her hand. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but I didn't want it to change the way you saw me. I wanted you to know me for who I am, not for what I have." She squeezed his hand gently. "You didn't need to hide it," she said softly. "You're the same person to me no matter what you own. Money and titles don't make a person better. It's how they treat others that matters." Her words touched him deeply. He had met countless people in his life, business partners, investors, colleagues, but few spoke with such sincerity. Her simplicity wasn't just a part of her personality, it was her strength. She had never been impressed by wealth, and even now, knowing the truth, she remained the same, calm, grounded, and genuine. He told her more about his work, his journey, and how he had built his success quietly, preferring to stay out of the spotlight. She listened with interest, not because of the wealth behind his story, but because of the effort and discipline it revealed. She respected hard work, and she could see that his success hadn't come easily. It made her proud, but not in a material sense. She admired his perseverance and the way he had stayed humble despite his achievements. Later that day, they took a walk together through the city. People recognized him, some greeting him respectfully, others taking photos from afar. She noticed the attention but stayed close to him, quietly observing how he handled it with grace. He greeted everyone politely, never acting superior or distant. She realized that despite his position, he shared her belief in humility. It made her heart warm. As they sat in a small cafe, she laughed softly and said, "I suppose I should have taken that first-class seat then. It was already paid for, wasn't it?" He chuckled. "Perhaps, but I think you made the right choice. It's who you are, and that's what I love most about you." They talked for hours, not about wealth or business, but about life, about how people often chase things they don't need. Forgetting the joy in simplicity, she told him stories from her small town, about neighbors who shared meals, children who played in the streets, and the beauty of honest living. He listened intently, fascinated by her perspective. In her words, he found something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. That evening, as they returned home, she reflected on everything she had learned that day. Her husband's revelation had changed the details of her life, but not its meaning. She realized that knowing he was a billionaire didn't make her feel different. She still saw him as the man who cared for her, who listened, who shared quiet moments over tea and laughter. The wealth around them didn't define their relationship, love and respect did. Before going to bed, she stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. They sparkled like stars scattered across the ground, each one representing a different story. She smiled softly, thinking about her journey, the flight, the surprise, the laughter. Life had a way of surprising people when they least expected it. And even though her world had changed, her heart remained the same. In that quiet moment, she whispered to herself, "I guess life really is full of unexpected turns." But she felt no fear, only gratitude. Gratitude for love, for truth, and for the strength to remain grounded even when the world around her shifted. As she turned off the light and lay down to rest, she felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't dream of wealth or luxury. Instead, she dreamed of home, of the small town she had come from, of morning tea by the window and laughter shared with loved ones. And as sleep embraced her, she carried within her the same gentle heart that had made her turn down that first-class seat, unaware that in doing so, she had shown the world the quiet beauty of simplicity and grace. The days that followed were unlike anything she had experienced before. Her husband's world was full of things she had never paid attention to: meetings, assistants, schedules, and endless calls. Every morning, she watched him move through his day with calm confidence, making decisions that affected hundreds of people. Though she was proud of him, she often smiled quietly to herself, wondering how he managed to stay so composed in such a demanding life. She never asked him for anything. She didn't suddenly change the way she lived just because she now knew about his wealth. Her clothes remained simple, her manners unchanged. The household staff admired her humility. She spoke to everyone kindly, never with authority or pride. When the kitchen staff prepared elaborate meals, she would often help them serve or clear the table despite their gentle protests. Her presence brought warmth to the house in a way no amount of wealth ever could. One afternoon, while her husband was at work, she decided to explore the city. She didn't take the luxury car that was offered to her. Instead, she walked out quietly, blending into the crowd like anyone else. She visited a small market nearby, filled with the scent of spices, fresh fruit, and baked bread. Vendors called out cheerfully, children ran between stalls, and laughter filled the air. It reminded her of home, the simple rhythm of ordinary life. She stopped by a small tea shop, ordered a cup, and sat by the window. The place was old, with wooden chairs and faded posters on the walls. Yet it felt cozy, full of life. She watched people passing by outside, the shopkeepers arranging their goods, a mother holding her child's hand, a young man helping an old lady cross the street. It was in these moments that she found real beauty, the kind that couldn't be bought or owned. As she sat there, a woman at the next table started a conversation. They talked easily about small things, the weather, the city, the little joys of daily life. When the woman asked what brought her to the city, She simply said she was visiting family. She didn't mention her husband's name or who he was. She preferred it that way. She didn't want people to treat her differently. To her, being known for her kindness meant more than being known for her status. Later that evening, when she returned home, her husband was already back. He smiled when he saw her and asked about her day. She told him about the market, the tea shop, and the friendly conversation. He listened with quiet interest, his eyes softening. "You could have had someone drive you," he said gently. She laughed lightly and replied, "I wanted to see the world the way everyone else does. It makes me feel alive." He smiled, understanding her completely. It was one of the things he loved about her, that she never let the world's comfort change her nature. In the following weeks, she began to meet people from her husband's professional circle. Some were polite, others curious. A few seemed skeptical, wondering how such a simple woman had become the wife of one of the most powerful men in the industry. But she remained herself through it all, graceful, kind, and calm. When she spoke, her words carried sincerity. When she listened, she gave her full attention. Slowly, even those who doubted her began to see the quiet strength beneath her simplicity. At a charity event her husband hosted, she wore a plain dress. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it suited her perfectly. As she moved through the room, people noticed her calm presence. She didn't seek attention, yet she drew it naturally. When guests spoke to her, they were surprised by her humility. She asked about their families, their work, their hopes, things that truly mattered. Many left the conversation feeling lighter, inspired by her genuine warmth. Her husband watched her from across the room, pride shining in his eyes. He had attended countless events before, filled with people trying to impress or gain favor. But that night felt different. Her presence changed the atmosphere. She reminded everyone that kindness and authenticity had a power that wealth could never replace. As the evening ended, one of his business partners approached her and said, "You're not like most people in this world." She smiled softly and replied, "I don't think people are meant to be the same. We all have our own way of living, and this is mine." Back home, she and her husband sat together in the garden, the night calm and the stars bright above them. He told her how people at the event couldn't stop talking about her grace. She laughed gently, shaking her head. "I just spoke to them like I would to anyone else," she said. "People are people, no matter who they are or what they have." He reached for her hand and said, "You don't realize how rare that is. In a world full of masks, you're the one person who doesn't wear one." Her eyes softened. "Maybe that's because I never needed one," she replied. "I learned long ago that it's easier to be yourself than to pretend to be something you're not." Their days continued in quiet harmony. While he handled his work and responsibilities, she focused on small acts of goodness. She visited local shelters, met with families in need, and helped children in schools. She never announced her visits or sought recognition. She preferred to give quietly, believing that the best kind of help was the kind that came from the heart. Sometimes, when she came home tired from these visits, her husband would ask why she worked so hard when she didn't need to. Her answer was always the same. Because kindness isn't work, it's living. Her actions began to change how people saw her husband as well. His employees noticed how humble he had become, how often he mentioned his wife's wisdom in meetings. He started new programs to support workers, inspired by her belief that every person deserved respect. The company slowly took on a more compassionate image, not because of strategy, but because her spirit had touched its foundation. One afternoon, while they were having lunch together, he said thoughtfully, "Do you know what people call you now?" She smiled curiously. "What do they call me?" He chuckled softly. "They call you the heart of the company." She laughed, shaking her head. "I'm no heart of anything," she said lightly. "I'm just someone who believes people should be kind." He looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "That's exactly why they call you that." Time passed and she continued to live with the same grace she always had. Though she now had access to everything, luxury cars, private jets, designer clothes, she chose what felt right for her. Sometimes she still preferred to walk through markets, to talk to strangers, to sit on park benches with a cup of tea. She stayed connected to the world in ways that wealth often makes people forget. Her friends from her small town visited one weekend. They were nervous at first, unsure how to act in such a grand house. But she greeted them just like before, with warmth and laughter. She showed them around, but she didn't brag about anything. Instead, she focused on their stories, their lives, their families. By the time they left, they told her, "You may live in a big house now, but your heart hasn't changed at all." She smiled at their words. Deep down, she knew that was true. She had promised herself that no matter where life took her, she would never forget her roots. One morning, she and her husband were having breakfast when he asked, "If you could change anything about your life, what would it be?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "Nothing," she said simply. "Everything that happened, every turn led me here. I wouldn't change any of it." He nodded thoughtfully, a look of quiet appreciation on his face. "I don't think I would either," he admitted. "Meeting you changed everything for me," she laughed softly. "You're giving me too much credit," but he shook his head. "No, I'm not. You reminded me what matters. I used to think success was about numbers and growth. But now I know it's about people, their hearts, their happiness. You taught me that." Her eyes glistened as she looked at him. "Then we've both learned something," she said gently. "Because you've shown me that not all wealth is empty. When it's used with kindness, it can make the world better." They smiled at each other, both realizing how far they had come, not in distance or status, but in understanding. Life had surprised them both, bringing together two people from completely different worlds, united not by luxury or fame, but by love and shared values. That night she sat by the window, just as she had always done back in her small town. The view was different now, city lights instead of quiet streets, but her thoughts were the same. She still found peace in the simple moments, in gratitude for the life she had, and in the love that filled her heart. As she watched the sky, her husband joined her, wrapping a light shawl around her shoulders. "You still like sitting by the window?" he said softly. She smiled. "Some habits are too precious to change." He nodded, looking out at the same view. "I think that's why I fell in love with you," he said. "You see the world with eyes that never tire of wonder." She looked at him, her expression tender. "And you remind me that even in a world full of noise, there's always room for peace." They sat together in silence, watching the lights flicker in the distance. In that quiet moment, she knew that wealth and power would come and go, but the values they shared, the simplicity, kindness, and love, were what truly made life beautiful. And as the night deepened, she felt grateful once again, not for what they had, but for who they had become together. Years passed quietly, like pages turning in a book she had never planned to write. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined, yet at her core she remained the same woman who once chose an economy seat over first class. She still woke up early, enjoyed her tea by the window, and greeted everyone she met with a smile that came straight from the heart. Time had softened some things and strengthened others. Her husband's business had grown even larger, but so had their understanding of what truly mattered. Though their home was grand and their life comfortable, she never forgot how it felt to live simply. Some mornings, she would walk to the park near their house, watching children play, listening to the laughter that carried through the air. No one recognized her as the wife of a billionaire, and she preferred it that way. To them, she was just another person enjoying the quiet beauty of the morning, and that suited her perfectly. Her husband sometimes joined her on these walks, though his busy schedule rarely allowed it. When he did, they spoke about everything and nothing: the color of the sky, the smell of rain, the sound of leaves under their feet. He often told her that those simple talks brought him more peace than any Emmy, eating, or achievement ever could. He said she had a way of reminding him to slow down, to see life through gentler eyes. Over time, people began to notice how differently he ran his company. He treated employees like family, cared deeply for their well-being, and often credited his wife for teaching him that wealth meant nothing if it didn't help others. The company started projects that supported education, housing, and medical care for those in need. The world began to see him not just as a successful businessman, but as a man with a heart, and behind that change stood the simple woman who had never asked for any of it. One afternoon, they were invited to an international conference where he was to receive an award for social impact. The event was grand: lights, cameras, journalists, and dignitaries from around the world. She accompanied him, wearing a plain dress and soft colors as always. Reporters whispered, pointing out her modest appearance, wondering how someone so simple fit into such a glamorous setting. But she paid them no mind. She stood beside her husband, calm and graceful, her presence radiating quiet confidence. When her husband went on stage to receive his award, He spoke about his journey and the lessons he had learned. But as his speech neared its end, he turned toward her and said, "There's someone here who changed the way I see the world." She once declined a first-class seat on a plane, not knowing she owned the airline. That moment taught me more about humility than any book or mentor ever could. She showed me that success means nothing if it isn't rooted in kindness. The crowd applauded, and for a brief moment she felt a rush of emotion. Not pride, but gratitude. Gratitude for a life that had shown her both simplicity and abundance, and taught her to value what lies beyond both. After the ceremony, many people came to speak to her. Some were curious, others inspired. One young woman approached her shyly and said, "I want to be like you one day. Not rich, but strong and kind." She smiled gently and replied, "Then you already are. Strength and kindness are choices you make every day, not things you wait to become." The girl's eyes filled with tears as she thanked her, and in that small exchange she saw the true purpose of her journey. In the years that followed, she and her husband spent more time giving back. They built schools in rural areas, supported local artisans, and funded hospitals. But she always kept her involvement quiet. She didn't like her name being printed on plaques or walls. "Good deeds don't need signatures," she often said. "The people who benefit from them are the real proof." Her words spread quietly, inspiring others to give without expecting anything in return. Despite their busy lives, she made sure they took time for themselves. On their anniversaries, they would revisit small places that held memories: the little tea shop where she once sat alone, the market she loved to walk through, the park bench where they shared stories about their dreams. Every visit reminded them that happiness didn't come from grand gestures, but from moments of connection. There were times when her husband would look at her with amazement. "You've lived in this world of luxury for years," he said once, "and yet you still find joy in the smallest things. How do you do it?" She smiled softly and replied, "Because small things never stopped being beautiful. People only forget to notice them." Her life became an example for many, though she never tried to be one. Articles were written about her, calling her the humble heart behind an empire, but she never read them. She didn't like the attention. What mattered to her was the people she helped, the lives she touched, and the peace she found in knowing she stayed true to herself. One morning, while sitting by the window, she received a letter from a young girl in a remote village. The girl wrote about how the new school in her town had changed her life. She ended the letter with, "I don't know who helped build our school, but I hope they know they gave me a chance to dream." Tears filled her eyes as she folded the letter gently. She placed it in her drawer with the other letters she had received over the years, each one a quiet reminder of why she chose this path. As time went on, her husband began to slow down his work. They spent more time traveling, not to fancy resorts, but to places filled with life and history. They visited small towns, talked to locals, and listened to their stories. Everywhere they went, she found a way to connect with people, sharing laughter, advice, and kindness. Her warmth seemed to follow her like sunlight. One evening, they returned to the same airline she had once traveled on, the very flight where everything began. This time, when the staff recognized who she was, they immediately offered her a first-class seat. She smiled kindly and said, "Thank you, but I'd prefer to sit in economy." The staff looked surprised, but her husband only laughed quietly, knowing exactly why she said that. As they sat together on the plane, she turned to him and said, "Do you remember the first time I said no to this seat?" He nodded. "How could I forget? That decision changed everything." She smiled softly. "Funny how life works. Sometimes the choices we make without thinking become the ones that shape our future." The plane took off and she gazed out the window. The clouds looked just as they always had, soft and endless. For a moment she thought about the journey of her life, the places she'd been, the lessons she'd learned, the people she'd met. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been beautiful in its own way. After landing, they walked through the airport hand in hand. No one stopped them, no one stared. To the world, they were just another couple among the crowd. And that, to her, was perfect. She didn't need recognition or attention. The quiet love between them, the shared laughter, and the life they built together were more than enough. Years later, when she looked back on her life, she realized how far she had come from that simple woman who once refused a first-class seat. She had seen the world from both sides, the simple and the grand, and she knew now that real richness was not about where you sat, but who you were while sitting there. Her husband often told her that she was his compass, the one who kept him grounded when the world tried to pull him away, and she would always respond with a smile and say, "You were my wings, the one who showed me how far love could take me." They grew older together, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their bond growing even deeper. On quiet evenings, they would sit in the garden holding hands watching the sunset. They didn't talk much in those moments, they didn't need to. The silence between them was full of everything they had shared. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, she whispered, "Do you ever think about that flight?" He smiled. "Every time I see a plane, I do. I think about how lucky I was that you chose the seat you did." She laughed softly. "I guess life had its way of putting us in the right place at the right time." He nodded, still holding her hand. "And it's been the best journey I could have asked for." She looked at him, her eyes gentle and full of love. "Me too," she said. "Not because of where we went, but because of who I went with." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with its last light. The garden grew quiet, the air calm and full of peace. And as the evening settled in, she closed her eyes for a moment, feeling grateful for the love that found her, for the life that shaped her, and for the simple truth that had guided her all along. In the end, she had learned that simplicity wasn't the absence of wealth, but the presence of understanding. It was about knowing that what truly matters can't be bought: kindness, love, honesty, and peace. And as long as she had those things, she would always feel rich no matter where life took her.